Alrighty guys, it is Qaaman here today, and I'm bringing you another weekly Dragon Ball Super discussion. And this time we're going to be talking about something that happened on the most recent episode of Dragon Ball Super. We saw a crossover between Dr.Slump and Dragon Ball. So without wasting any more time, I'm going to be solo today and giving you guys 5 ways I feel that Arale herself can actually improve Dragon Ball Super if there was a way to put her into the story. So without wasting any more time, let's get straight into this video. So, the first thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is humor. And I think this is very important. If you think about it, guys, Akira Toriyama, if you study his work prior to Dragon Ball, and even if you study, all of his manga works as a whole, he is a gag comic writer. He's in his pure true element when he's writing gag humor. And if you look at, Akira Toriyama, there was obviously a lot of that, especially earlier in Dragon Ball, but the show obviously took a much more serious turn of events. If you look at the series from, I guess, maybe the 22nd tournament all the way until the rest of the series. And then if you look at the Buu saga, it's like he took a serious villain in Majin Buu and then kind of put some of his gag humor back in it. But Toriyama has always shown these signs. And if you look at Arale, looking at the most previous episode of Dragon Ball Super in 69, if she was in the Dragon Ball Super series, she could allow not just Toriyama, but the actual Dragon Ball Super writers and the entire editing staff to add a lot more humor in the series, because after looking at how she performed against, Vegeta and using her pretty much infinite powers as a gag character, you can really use that to, I guess you could say, compare her to other characters in the series. For example, let's say you had a scenario in which Arale went to go meet Zeno. Obviously Zeno's like the super powerful character, but if Arale is written, even though it wouldn't make sense, if Arale is written to be stronger than Zeno because of the simple gag character factor, that could actually make it a lot more humorous for the fans. Now, if you put her too much into the series, that could kind of drag it on too much, but I definitely believe that putting Arale in the series could definitely add a lot of humor. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about is she can be used to fight stronger villains. Now, Jax Blade and I talked about this before. One major problem that Dragon Ball Super has right now is the fact that it has too many strong characters, especially with Zeno. And if you think about it, in the case of Zamasu, individually, Zamasu actually won in Future Trunks' timeline. He pretty much wiped out all of the mortals with the exception of the handful that survived. And in essence, if it wasn't for Zeno, Zamasu would still be around. So if you really think about it, that was a character that they had no chance of beating unless they had called Zeno, which now means that the Zeno button is now presenting a problem that if Goku ever got into trouble, you could pretty much press the Zeno button, Zeno could come and he could pretty much wipe out whatever threat you have. If you have Arale in the show, however, as I said before, she could add humor, but now you can use Arale to kind of fight alongside Goku, against other characters in the series. Now, like I said, you can't use her to an extended effect, but you can definitely use her in some ways, and we've seen this before. If you remember in the actual Dragon Ball series, Goku took a village to Penguin Village, and during the General Blue arc, and they actually fought against General Blue, and she easily defeated him. And looking at how she was competing against the Super Saiyan Blue and Vegeta, I definitely do think that it would be interesting to see a gag character used in more serious fights. You could add humor to it, but it would also be interesting to see Arale actually in a more serious connotation. And it would be cool to kind of mix gag humor with actual major villains. So I definitely think she could be used to fight stronger villains based on how strong she is. And I think that the next point I want to bring up is the fact that it can make the writing a lot more creative, and it can make the writing a lot more unpredictable. Now, Dragon Ball Super obviously uses a lot of characters that we are familiar with. You know, we obviously have known these characters ever since Dragon Ball, Goku, Bulma, you know, Gohan in Dragon Ball Z, Master Roshi, all these characters, we've seen these characters for years and years and years. And if you were to add the Dr. Slump universe to the Dragon Ball universe, what this can now do is now you have a completely new cast of characters that could really mesh well with the current Dragon Ball cast. And there really aren't any rules that you have to follow, because you can follow the events of Dr. Slump up to a certain point, up to obviously Dragon Ball Super. And I think that would be really interesting. So for example, I did some research here for you guys. There's some really cool characters like Superman. And if you guys remember from Dragon Ball, you know, when Goku went to Penguin Village, there's pretty much like this short, stumpy version of Superman. It's a complete knockoff of Superman himself. They even played like a Superman theme, you know, when he was around. And in the Japanese version, they refer to him as Kalarku Kentu. So there's literally a direct incantation of him, and that would be really cool to put him in the Dragon Ball world, especially for people who have always been interested with the whole Goku versus Superman clash. And there's also another version of Kami in the Dr. Slump universe. Now, we're obviously used to our version of Kami that fused with Piccolo, the guy who was later revealed to be a Namekian, and the Guardian of the Earth, who obviously lived in Kami's tower. But the Kami of the Dr. Slump universe is actually a Master Roshi lookalike. And the interesting thing about him, and the Kami in general of the Dr. Slump universe, is that he pretty much placed these Gachins, which were those angel-like creatures that we saw in episode 69 of Dragon Ball Super, to pretty much, you know, prevent the Earthlings from actually advancing, you know, in the series. And eventually he looked at how happy things were in Penguin Village, and he kind of just allowed, you know, humanity to advance in its own way. And that would be really interesting to see the Gachins kind of interacting with the very technologically advanced world of Dragon Ball, especially as we've seen the Gachins, they like to eat a lot of things. And it would also be really cool to see all of the other characters like Sukotsun Sun or Akane Kimidori. And quite honestly, you know, a lot of those characters were, and I did a video about this before, guys, a lot of those characters in the Dragon Ball, you know, anime series, they were voiced by Funimation voice actors. So it would actually be really cool to see who voices who and to see all of those characters interacting. You could see, you know, Dr. Norimaki, or Arale's, you know, surrogate mother as well, Midori as well. So I really feel like the ability to add new characters to the series would be cool, and I think it also make Dragon Ball fans have a lot more respect for Toriyama's other work outside of Dragon Ball, because it would make fans more interested in seeing his entire work as a whole. And in fact, I honestly think that by doing that, I definitely feel like it would cause Toriyama himself to be a lot more motivated to work on it, because now he's being a lot more creative with combining two shows. Now, one thing here that's more for marketing is that obviously Dragon Ball is a shonen manga. And obviously, guys, you guys would know by now that shonen pretty much translates to a show, you know, obviously being geared towards young boys. Arale is obviously a female, but she has very tomboy-esque characteristics. So by having Arale in the series, you can have like a childlike character along with maintaining all of the major Dragon Ball characters. So you have kind of a mix of the kid-friendly stuff also combined with the serious, really powerful, you know, elements of the Dragon Ball Z series, Dragon Ball Super, Dragon Ball series that we've seen. So I think that could obviously mesh very well. And her tomboy-esque personality could make her a lot more marketable. It could be used for merchandise. And I think that would actually add a lot more popularity towards the show. And last but not least, guys, the most obvious thing that I feel like Arale can improve the Dragon Ball Super series with is, I feel like this could lead to crossovers, specials, and whether it be a TV special or, you know, kind of a crossover in general. And it could lead to a lot of things outside of this. And I really feel like if Arale is not a staple in the Dragon Ball series, that would be fine, because if you overuse her, it's going to kind of make fans potentially get bored with her personality. But I definitely do feel like if it's maybe for an arc or, maybe for another, I don't know, maybe a filler-esque point of Dragon Ball Super, I definitely feel like Arale could definitely improve the Dragon Ball Super series. So, guys, these Dragon Ball Super discussions, like I've said before, guys, these are completely my opinion on the issues. I want to hear what you guys have to say. Do you guys agree with what I say? Do you think Arale can improve the Dragon Ball Super series? Or do you kind of just want Dragon Ball Super to stay the same, kind of keep the main cast of characters, and if maybe use Arale, maybe use her in snippets or whatnot? I'm really curious to hear your feedback, guys. Do you like her? Do you not? And what would your expectations be if you were to put her into the series, and how do you guys think she should be used? I'm going to be responding to a lot of your comments to this, and I think this has been a fun conversation. So with everything else said, please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys.